Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brian Abrams with PMO Partners. Thanks so much for joining us today for the next installment in our webinar series. Today, I am the guest of the webinar, leveraging a flexible project management workforce. Very excited to have everyone on today and really appreciate you taking an hour during your lunchtime today to come spend some time with us and talk about this interesting topic and important topic. I'm hoping to speak to the folks out there that are PMO leaders and looking to figure out how to best manage their workforce, and also to those that are in the workforce and thinking about where they want to take their careers. I think this particular webinar should be of interest to everybody. Okay, for those that don't know about us or myself, PMO Partners is a niche staffing firm working with organizations across the country to provide them with great project managers for their staff and the initiatives that they have. We work across all industries and all different types of employment types, which we'll be talking about today. I lead a great team that works with my clients and candidates and help guide them on a daily basis, as well as work with the project management community as well. So it's a little bit about us. Again, thanks for being here. For those PMPs and those folks that are looking to get their PDU, you can log on to the PMI website under digital and online media, and you can earn 1 PDU for attending today's webinar. And the series continues next month on March 20th with Evans Travis, who's a really interesting guy, and he's going to talk about his experiences reorganizing the PMO where he works at the SAS Institute. And Evans is a well-known speaker amongst the PMI groups here in the Northeast. I'm guessing many of you have heard of him. I definitely invite you to come join us next month for Evans's presentation. And really, I'm looking forward to that one as well. Really good topic, especially for those that are involved in reorganizing their PMOs or starting up a new PMO. This will definitely be a great presentation. All right, so again, today's webinar is about leveraging a flexible project management workforce, and really kind of describing what that means. And I think, some of the things that we're going to cover today are defining the flexible workforce, what that is, and why it's important to start thinking about that now. Some of the benefits of utilizing a flexible workforce, as well as some of the risks and challenges that come along with hiring various types of workers. How to engage the various types of workers. You have to approach each type in a different way. So we're going to talk about that. And what you should be doing now. And at the end of the webinar, we'll also have a Q&A session. So I definitely welcome those that have questions. All right, so the flexible workforce, what is it? I'm guessing a lot of you have heard about this and heard of some of the various terms that come along with the flexible workforce. Flexible workforce describes a staff that is optimized for when it's needed. So having just the right amount of staff for where your team, where your company is at currently and in the future, that's really what a flexible workforce is, having just the right amount, not too much or too little. What's going on now that we're hearing so much about this? According to a study done by Intuit, right now 40% of American workers are contractors. In other words, not full-time permanent employees, but contractors. And by 2027, more than half of the American workforce are going to be contractors. So this is something that's current and also going to be more important in the next several years. So we're going to need to really learn what this is and how to harness the power of a flexible workforce. All right, before I get started any further, or before I continue any further, I wanted to do a quick poll. So I'm going to bring that up. We're going to talk about the types of folks that you've hired in the past, and please feel free to click on the different poll questions that come up here. So direct hire employees, contract to hire, consultants, and part-timers. Please click on which ones that you've actually hired. Okay, we'll wait a few more seconds for some more votes to come in. Okay, great. So the votes are in, and direct hire employees and consultants both came in at around 85%. And the type that folks are least familiar with are part-timers and freelancers. And yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that in detail later on and some of the good approaches for those type of folks. Thank you for voting. There's the results. Great, okay, so the different types of employees. Okay, so first we have our direct hire employees. These are the full-timers, the folks that are dedicated employees to the company, and we're going to be getting into detail about that and the types of PMs that are good to be direct hire employees. Then there's contract to hire. That's a little bit more of a tricky situation, but yes, we know a lot of companies like to hire on contract to hire bases for different reasons, so we're going to talk about that. Consultants and contractors, nowadays pretty much every client I know of and most companies out there use consultants for various reasons, so we'll talk about that as well. And the part-timers, the freelancers, those that are really have embraced the gig economy. We'll get into more detail on that. Okay, so your direct hire employees, especially the project managers, and when I talk here, I'm always going to talk from the slant of project managers because that's who's on the call here and who we specialize in working with at PMO Partners. These folks bring to the table a broad perspective, a broad experience. They've been on multiple types of projects. They've worked in various industries, and likely they've touched on a variety of different technologies. So when you're looking to bring on permanent hires, you want folks with a variety of experience, and these are folks that likely will be able to jump into multiple different projects that you have and be able to do a great job and contribute across multiple things at once. These are folks that are loyal to the company. You can depend on them to be there. They expect to be treated well, hopefully be moved up the chain over time, and It's really their goal to stay there, and it's a good way for them to support their lifestyles and their families. So they're giving loyalty to the company, and they would expect the same back. And they appreciate the stability of being in a full-time, permanent role and the work-life balance that comes along with that, and the benefits that come along with being a direct hire employee as well. This has been, pretty standard for years for hiring all types of employees and certainly all types of project managers. Things are going to start shifting over the next couple of years, where we see companies start utilizing direct hires less and less. It'll always be there. It just won't be as prevalent, 7 to 10 years down the road. Next up, I want to talk about contract to hires. And, you see the question marks over the folks' heads there. So contract to hires are a little bit tricky, and you really need to understand how to approach these folks and what their motivations are when you're looking to do a contract to hire arrangement. These are folks that can help out with a specific project now and in the long term. So if you are an organization that runs a large package like SAP, it might be a good idea to hire someone on a contract to perm, because you'll always have SAP and constantly be adding to it and making changes to it. Workday is another example. These are folks that can help out with a specific project now, and they should be a good fit for the organization in the long term. So I put here, try before you buy. So these are folks that you will likely bring on really for multiple reasons. A lot of it has to do with budget issues. Sometimes companies can't hire permanent employees at a certain time, but they can hire someone as a consultant and ultimately bring them on perm. So you can look at it as a try before you buy situation. And the candidate themselves are also looking at that like that. So when they're working there as a contractor, they're trying to feel out, okay, is this the right place for me? And, we're going to talk later about some of the ways that you can approach these folks. Ultimately, someone that you bring on a contract to hire, their goal is to become a full-time hire. They're not the types that are going to want to stay on as a consultant forever. So there is some danger to not hiring them at the point where it was discussed that you would previously hire them, usually after 3 months or 6 months. If the contract piece goes on for too long, you do run a risk of losing them because these are people that do want to become permanent. They want to become part of the culture and, of course, get those same type of benefits that the full-time hires get. So when you're talking to them and interviewing them, you want to keep that in mind, that this is someone that does want to come here for the long term. So you got to be careful with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about the consultants and the part-time employees, because they are part of what we call the gig economy. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about the gig economy and what that means, and side hustles and things like that. So now I think it's a good time to talk about what that means, and essentially the gig economy, which is really what the experts say we're entering now, is where there's a prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs. So this is a workforce that expects and really thrives in working either part-time jobs here, multiple part-time jobs, or contract engagements And, we're going to talk about some of the differences of those types of folks in a bit. Some of the aspects of a gig economy I have listed here is remote work, people working remotely, working from home. I've seen an uptick of this over the last couple of years. Even for consultants that I place, they're allowed to work from home. Flexible hours, hours that fit into their lifestyle as well as the company's how the company likes to work. Most workers nowadays expect a lot of flexibilities from their employers. Outsourcing, or what we call the human cloud, which is a newer term. Outsourcing your work to people that you may not have even met before. That's going on a lot. Even in the project management world, I'm seeing things like junior project manager roles and project coordinator work being outsourced. And that's being done through a lot of online communications tools such as Upwork. For those who don't know, Upwork is a platform where employees go and they announce their services, and employers can bid to get their services. Definitely something that is going to become more prevalent in the upcoming years. And working on the go and bring your own device. We're seeing employees, even contractors, work from really wherever they are. So they could work from home one week and then they travel on vacation and they want to catch up on vacation, and I don't know, they spend a day or two working while they're in Florida or Mexico or wherever else. So a lot of employees nowadays expect that they can just work from wherever they're located. And BYOD, which stands for Bring Your Own Device. A lot of folks nowadays like to use their own tablets and phones to work. This brings up, as well as working on the go, of course, brings up a lot of security issues. So companies are going to have to understand how to approach folks that are working on the go and expecting to use their own devices while at work. All right, let's talk about consultants and contractors. These are the folks that are the folks that you hire for a specific purpose, really, a specific project that you have where you don't have the internal expertise. So you bring in an outsider who is going to come in and really do a bang up job and hit the ground running. So for example, I said Workday earlier. Workday is a great example of where you would use a project manager to come in as a consultant, because there are project managers that specialize in Workday. There's project managers that specialize in Salesforce. They also specialize in certain industries. There are PMs that just like to work in financial services, or they just like to work in healthcare. So these are folks that bring a specific expertise to a project, and they're going to hit the ground running just because they're specialists. And it's important when you bring in, or when you have a certain project that needs to get done within a certain time frame, to hire a specialist. They're just going to bring a lot more value. These folks enjoy picking up new skills and getting new exposures. So one of the ways that consultants grow in their careers is that they get exposure to other things. So I just said before that these folks are specialists, but they also keep up on the current trends and what's going on. Couple of examples. I placed a project manager who is a specialist in CRM with a higher ed client who was implementing a special CRM for higher ed. and he got exposure to the higher ed world, which is something he never really had before. And that experience is something that's likely going to help him get another gig at a higher ed institution, because every organization likes to hire folks, especially project managers, with previous industry experience. Another example is a project manager that specializes in PeopleSoft. He or she would love to get into a project that that is converting, where the company's converting PeopleSoft to Workday, which is happening a lot lately, as I'm sure you've seen out there. So if he can get into that project where he can get PeopleSoft to Workday experience and get exposed to Workday, there's a good chance another gig down the road, he'll be able to get onto a Workday project. So these folks have certain experience, and they love to get new exposures to broaden their experience and their expertise. They like the fast pace of crucial projects, and they work well under pressure. They're used to it. They're used to high demands. They understand, timelines and how to get things done within a specific timeline. So they're accustomed to taking on a lot, and they're likely very seasoned and are able to handle pressure and know what to do in most situations. These folks are not likely to become a direct hire. So I've seen the mistakes that some clients make in the past, where they hire a consultant on a long-term project, and they like them and they really want them to become perm, but the consultants themselves don't want to become perm for the reasons I just mentioned earlier, that they like getting different exposures. And also a consultant is likely going to be much too expensive to convert to a permanent hire. So keep in mind, when you hire a consultant, these are not folks that are going to become a permanent or direct hire for your organization. All right, I noticed earlier that a lot of folks were not too familiar with hiring part-timers and freelancers. I'm starting to see really an uptick of this with my clients, and I actually think this is going to become a trend in the future. So this is something that you might want to do a bit more research on, and see what the viability is of hiring part-timers for your organization. These folks will likely be engaged on 2 or 3 projects at a time. I actually had a gentleman working for me 20 hours a week at one of my clients, and he had his own tutoring company on the side. So it worked out perfect for him, because he got to work on his company and he got to supplement his income by working 20 hours a week at my client. So these are people likely that have multiple projects that they're doing, and probably have some type of project or initiative that they're doing in their personal life as well. So it all works out just right for them. Some part-timers will work as little as 5 hours a week, and some will work as many as 30. Again, all depends on their lifestyle and how it works out for the client. These folks you're very likely to bring back in the future. So for example, if you have a project where you're using someone for 20 hours a week for 6 months, then when that project's over, maybe 6 months or a year later, you're looking to do a part 2. You can bring these folks back pretty easily. One, because they're probably going to have some availability because they are a part-timer. And 2, they already know your organization, so they'll be able to slide into it really quickly. Okay, so how do we engage these folks, all these different types of employment? Human resources and referrals and online advertisements might be the best way to engage the permanent type of hires or the full-time hires, working with your HR group, perhaps setting up a referral program, which I've seen has been very successful, and then online advertising, perhaps with the user groups that you're affiliated with, or some type of niche website dedicated to whatever type of industry you're in, or technology that you're a part of. Human resources, referrals, online advertisements, your own network, definitely good ways to engage folks for those permanent positions. For the contract to hire and the consulting positions, as well as the part-time positions, definitely a good way to engage these folks would be to use a staffing firm, a staffing firm that specializes in the area that is important to you. They're going to have a network of people that they utilize, and that would likely be the best way to engage those type of candidates. And also, there are legal issues to hiring consultants directly. So utilizing a staffing firm as a buffer might help mitigate that risk. Also, the human cloud, as I mentioned before, sites like Upwork might be a good way to find part-timers especially. I'm going to take a second to address some of the comments in the chat. Let's see. Okay. What and how to get into a referrals program? Well, I was speaking, Adelina, primarily about companies setting up their own referral program. I think that networking with friends and networking on places like LinkedIn is a good way to get referrals to positions. Okay. Who needs to be involved now that you've decided that you want to hire? Who needs to be involved? So definitely the C-level and the VP level in your company are folks that you're going to want to talk with about this hire. Certainly, these are folks that have oversight into the overall budget and initiatives for the company, so you're going to want to connect with them. Certainly your human resources team, which of course gets involved in all types of hiring, you're going to want to talk with them about the type of hire that you want to make and how you can bring it up. Does it make sense to engage with a staffing firm? And of course, finance. Finance is going to have a say in the overall budget of your projects, and of course, what type of staff that you bring on. So the C-level, human resources, and finance, all the different types of folks that you're going to want to engage with when thinking about making a hire. Interview styles. So what I'm talking about here is how you want to approach the different types of employees that I had mentioned earlier. So for direct hires, you want to get an idea of their overall background and the culture fit, as well as their overall industry experience and really their desire to be on board for the long term. So for this type of hire, likely they're going to need to meet with multiple people, including your peers, your boss, your boss's boss. It's likely going to be a longer process, which makes sense. You're going to want to really thoroughly interview a direct hire for a permanent direct hire position, because they're going to be the folks that are supposed to be there forever, and a lot of people are going to want a say. I mentioned earlier, contract to hire is tricky. You want to kind of have a mix of the SMEs within your company, as well as people that these folks would be working with on a day-to-day basis. And really, when you're interviewing them, you want to make sure that these folks are okay with the contract to perm arrangement, and really clearly understand what that contract to hire engagement looks like, including you know, the terms for before they go hire. You know, again, that could either be 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. It's really important that the candidate is clear on this. That way, there isn't any miscommunications when it is time to become perm, because you don't want to be disappointed, say at that 6-month mark, when you thought this person was going to go permanent, but they really want to stay a consultant. And also, if you have a 6-month term before hire, you don't want this person asking you at the 2-month mark if they can go perm. So the interview team, as well as, you know, perhaps a staffing firm that the candidate's working with, really need to be clear on the status of what the role is. Consultants, it's really important that you bring in your subject matter experts. So for example, if you're implementing a Workday module and you're bringing in a project manager for that Workday implementation, it probably makes sense to have HR subject matter experts sit in on that interview, perhaps a director from HR or a VP of HR, as well as the technical leaders as well. So definitely it makes sense to have stakeholders sit in when interviewing project managers for consulting positions. And same thing for freelancers or part-timers. You want to have some SMEs talk with them as well. But also, you know, similar to hiring someone on a contract to hire basis, you want to make sure that the expectations are clear on hours and work locations, etc., because the consultant themselves might have a very different expectation based on how they used to work previously. So the topics of how many hours that person's going to work, where they're going to work, etc., should be made abundantly clear in the beginning. What to do now? Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the gig economy and direct hire employees and where the hiring's going for the future, what should we do now? Some things you can do to get ahead of this: identify the areas where you might need gig workers within your group, or perhaps in the company in general. Maybe take a look at your project portfolio and see what's happening 6 months from now, a year from now, and decide where the gaps are and what you might have to do. Resources, have the right tools in place to support remote workers. A lot of companies are using Okta and other collaboration tools to work with their gig employees. Like we just talked about, know the differences in attracting and interviewing the different types of workers. I think this part is really crucial. That way, you know who you're bringing on and what their expectations are, and they understand what your expectations are. And have retention plans and succession plans in place. You know, one of the inevitable things in working with consultants and gig workers, or really, you know, just in general with how hiring is going, people are going to leave the company. It's just how it is. You should have plans to retain your direct hire employees and make sure they're happy and stable, and also have some succession plans in place in case they do leave. Okay, there we have Marcus Smart taking the ball away from LeBron James in one of his patented moves. Thought I'd talk about some takeaways from the presentation here. The workforce is moving towards the usage of consultants and as-needed workers. This is inevitable. This is the way things are going in the workforce. It's important to understand the differences in how to engage and secure this type of talent. Project managers are really at the forefront of this due to the project-based nature of their work. Project managers are a great example of where workers in the gig economy are going. And technology and online tools are really driving the gig economy. Again, Upwork and collaboration tools are really an important piece, and apps are a really important piece of the gig economy. All right, before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to do one more poll. What are some of the biggest hiring issues that you faced? Everyone faces issues in their hiring from time to time. What are some of the issues that you faced? Have you had some hires leave? Have you had hires turn out to just not be a fit? Are there not enough qualified candidates out there? Are there disconnects between HR and hiring managers? That happens too. The budget, is the budget not enough to attract quality candidates? Does the hiring process take too long? I'll wait a few seconds for everyone to vote. Okay, it looks like everyone's really faced some of these issues at some point. The biggest one is recent hires turn out to not be a fit. Yeah, that happens. I think I think it's a mix of things, really. Just being prepared and asking the right questions of the potential candidates, and understanding what their intentions are and what their expectations are in the job, and bringing in the right resources to interview these folks might help mitigate some of those bad hires. Okay, I will now open it up to Q&A. How does salary differ with the types of hiring? For instance, is there a large discrepancy annually between direct hires and consultants? And this question comes from Tasha. That's a great question, Tasha. So yes, consultants do typically make more, and there's a few reasons for that. One of it is based on the type of expertise that they bring. That is usually worth the extra money to to a client, so they will pay more, and consultants do get more. And it's also to make up for the lack of benefits and you know, the potential risk of being a consultant. So in general, a consultant might make more than a someone who's in a permanent position. However, that comes with some risk, and someone that's in a permanent position may make a little less, but they do have a broader experience, and they also get the benefits that come along with being in a permanent position. Okay, I thought I saw some questions in the chat. Okay, this is from Martin. Hey, Martin. Gonna read your note here. That's a good question. So Martin's talking about bringing on consultants, and once they get acclimated and onto a project, then they leave, and that's a waste of time and money, and often a loss in knowledge. And how much time do you usually recommend a client should give to a candidate to get ramped up? A consultant should usually get ramped up pretty quickly. I'd say no more than 4 weeks. A true consultant, it would take them to get adjusted to a new environment and come up to speed. I'm just going to read your question one more time, Martin. Yeah, so I think so that's okay, Martin. I understood your question. So yeah, I think really 4 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, you know, depending on the complexity of the environment, is all it should take. I'd say you really want to evaluate your consultant after 4 weeks. If they're not coming up to speed, you know, between that 4 and 8 week mark, I think it probably makes sense to see if you should talk about cutting bait on that person. A consultant by nature should be someone that comes up to speed quickly and picks up your environment, and you should be seeing that value pretty quickly. If not, it may make sense to perhaps cut bait. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? Let's see. All right, well, if that is it, I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar presentation. Before you get going, just want to remind you one more time, we're going to have Evans Travis speaking. Here he is. We're going to have Evans Travis speaking about his experiences reorganizing his PMO. That's going to be March 20th at 12 o'clock. And if you signed up for this webinar, then you will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to this webinar presentation in case you want to go over it again. Certainly, I am open to having conversations with you if you have any questions about anything that I presented today. And again, thank you so much for joining the webinar. Hope to speak to you soon.